Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996. Welcome back to the Gay Buddhist Fellowship. Our tradition is to go around and introduce ourselves first, and then I'll introduce our speaker. To begin, my name is Tom.
Francisco.
I'm Kay.
Lies.
I'm David.
I'm Jim.
Shantanu.
My name's Harley.
My name's Bruein.
Jim.
Michael.
Beth.
David.
My name is Jerry.
I'm John.
Donald.
Jack.
My name is Pat.
I'm Richard.
I'm Brad.
My name is Ray.
I'm George.
My name is Henry.
My name is Prasad Chita.
David.
I'm Greg.
I'm Carl.
My name is Robert.
I'm Don.
My name is Joe.
I'm Clint.
Kirk.
Peter.
I'm Hal.
My name is Oswaldo.
I'm Donald.
My name is David.
Steve.
So we have the privilege today of being joined by Pamela Weiss. She has practiced in the Zen and Theravada traditions of Buddhism for over 25 years, including several years of Zen monastic training. She completed teacher training with Jack Kornfield through Spirit Rock, leads a Wednesday evening sitting group in San Francisco at San Francisco Insight, and teaches classes, workshops, and retreats internationally. Pamela is also an executive coach and the founder of Appropriate Response, a company dedicated to bringing principles and practices of Buddhism into the workplace. Pamela, welcome.
It's always funny to hear yourself, played back. Like, ooh, that's me. I just want to say I always love being here. So really nice to be here again with all of you. There's something about the space and the community and I don't know. It's not like Goldilocks a little. It's not too big and not too small. It's just about the right. And there's something here of I always feel a kind of openness and sincerity is how I would say. It's the feeling I have when I'm here. So I want to try to offer some reflections about the upcoming holiday of Thanksgiving. And my challenge in doing that is to try to say some things that are neither kind of, Pollyanna and rah-rah on one side, or like go gratitude, right? There's a lot of that around, you noticed? Or to be kind of doom and gloom about all of the things that we shouldn't be grateful for, because you may have noticed that there's quite a lot of trouble in the world. So I want to not ignore the real sorrow, pain, difficulty that we are sitting in the midst of, and at the same time point to some of the ways in which we may discover what I think of as a trio of terms: gratitude, generosity, and giving. And that braid, that mix, if you will, can in fact be a way to support us in the midst of real difficulty. Because the thing about our life as human beings is that it's kind of a both-and deal, right? It's not that either we're grateful and happy all the time, or that it's all going to hell in a handbasket and we should just forget about it anyway, right? And just doom and gloom. But in fact, at least for me, and probably for most of you, if we pay attention, we notice there's some of both. Right in the middle of difficulty, there's often extraordinary beauty and joy. Right in the midst of beauty and joy, there's the fleetingness that it is passing, the difficulty of impermanence. So the closer we get, the more intimately we get to sitting with, being with, touching our life, our real life, not our idea of life closely, the more we sit in the middle of this paradox of, well, which way is it? I have a very vivid memory of when I first started to sit a long time ago at San Francisco Zen Center. And I was young, and I was suffering a lot, and was kind of a little overzealous, maybe. And I started sitting in the evenings after work, and then I kind of caught the bug, and I started going early in the morning to the early morning sittings, and that pretty much changed my life entirely. Because once I started going in there early in the morning, it meant that I couldn't stay out late at night. So, as a young person in San Francisco, my social life began to really morph and transform. Anyway, I remember that I would go, and as I went and sat more, after each time I would go to sit, I would leave meditation and do a little, this will tell you an embarrassing amount about my personality, but I would do a little assessment. Like, how was my meditation? And I would do a little evaluation, like, well, was it good or was it bad? And I think what I meant at that time was, how concentrated or calm did I get? Or how, wildly distracted or in physical pain was I during the sitting? So I would do this evaluation. Well, was that a good sitting or not a good sitting? That was the mind that I brought. And I remember the day that I left, I don't know how many months into practice it was, when I went to do my evaluation, and I couldn't tell. Like, it was everything, right? There was good and there was bad, there was wonderful and there was difficult, and it was all of one piece. And that was really a very transformational moment in many ways, because my usual mind that wanted to put everything in order and lock it into its little boxes of pleasant, unpleasant, good, bad, me, you, had started to break down. And it turns out that while the breaking down of those lines of separation may be frightening sometimes or disorienting, they actually are. That process is actually one that is quite wonderful. So, in that spirit, I want to offer some thoughts about Thanksgiving, straddling these two dimensions of our shared life as human beings. I think that we're kind of mixed up about what brings us real happiness. And if we want to talk about giving thanks, which is what the holiday is about, I think that mixed upness translates to the holiday. So certainly Thanksgiving, like many other holidays which are fast approaching, in America anyway, have been kind of co-opted by, buy more stuff. Right? So American Thanksgiving, I read this morning, somewhat to my amazement, in the Chronicle it says that the feast aspect of Thanksgiving is kind of a myth. Like, actually, the real Thanksgiving holiday was a very small event hosted by a group of Puritans who were fasting, not feasting. Interesting. But somehow that wouldn't quite cut it in this culture. Right? We live in a culture of more. And so the feast aspect becomes what Thanksgiving has become all about. When in fact, if we roll back the feasting aspect, really what the underlying thrust of what the holiday is meant to point to is thanks. What the holiday is meant to point to is an appreciation, a celebration of the bounty of what's here. And again, it's tricky because that bounty, there's an underbelly, right? Even from the history of the holiday itself. So yes, we can appreciate even now the bounty of, I don't know, I was up hiking on Mount Tam yesterday, and oh my God, we live in the most amazing place. And it's easy to overlook, to get kind of numbed to, like, this is where everybody else wants to come and visit. It's an amazing city. It's an amazing countryside. It's an amazing bay, right, that we live in. So there's that aspect of appreciation for that bounty, but also remembering and recognizing that all of that bounty rests on the backs of the native people who were here, who were harmed immeasurably by us, our ability to be here now. That all of the bounty that we celebrate rests on the backs of slavery. That most of us, in some form or another, were refugees, right? That most of America came here out of something difficult. That we fled here because there was difficulty, and so here we are now on the inside looking out at this immense tragedy unfolding. And can all of that be included in our appreciation of what we have without overlooking the real difficulty or the underbelly side of what it took for us to be able to have what we have, right? My family I come from a lineage of German Jews. So it's a very poignant piece, particularly the refugee story at this moment. Because, and I think for many of us, it doesn't take very much to know how easy it would be to be on the other side. Right? To be the one being, probably everyone in this room knows, certainly as well as I do, what it feels to be on the outside, to be excluded, to be not allowed, to be not acknowledged, to be yourself. So we want to give thanks for all of what we have, and we also want to acknowledge the difficulty, both sides. So gratitude, generosity, and giving. In Buddhist teaching, I just learned this myself recently. You all probably are familiar with the term dana, because that's how pretty much dana in this tradition becomes a pitch to please give donations as money. But it's actually a much bigger term. And it turns out there are actually two terms that are a little bit distinct, which are dana and chaga. I never knew this. Chaga, which is C-A-G-A, means generosity. And chaga is an inclination of the heart. It's a movement of the heart. It's an opening toward. So when our hearts are open, when our hands are open, things flow through freely. And giving, which is dana, giving is an action. Chaga, is an orientation. So when we feel generosity, giving happens naturally. But what allows us to feel generous? And this is a piece that I think is really useful to consider, and that, I would posit, is gratitude. And gratitude is an attitude. It is. Gratitude I think of as learning to see. And this is the whole project of Buddhist teaching, is not literally to see with our eyes, but learning to be with things as they are. Learning to see clearly and truthfully what's here. Learning to fully be ourselves, but being willing to uncover what that really means, which is not a small project, because so much is piled on top. Right? The Buddha said, if you knew what I know about generosity, you would not let a day go by without giving away part of every meal. This is interesting teaching. If you knew what I know about generosity, you would not let a day go by without giving away part of every meal. In Buddhist psychology, it's understood that generosity, the technical language is, generosity is the proximate cause of, does anybody know? Happiness. Generosity is the proximate cause, meaning the most important precursor to happiness. We are mixed up, as I said, about happiness. So the Benedictine monk, Brother David Stendhal-Rast, who spent decades as kind of the spokesperson for gratefulness and gratitude. He has a wonderful organization that grew up around him that you can learn more about at gratefulness.org. Has his writings and teachings, and he's been on this for years and years. He says many, many wonderful things about gratitude, which I would encourage you to go listen to, but here's the pith. Sort of the Zen version, right? The pith description. He says, if you think that happiness will make you grateful, think again. If you think happiness will make you grateful, think again. It is gratefulness that makes you happy. So this encompasses both our mixed upness and a clear pointing, same pointing as the Buddha, that generosity actually brings a sense of happiness. That as we release our tightly held grip on things, on opinions, on people, on ourselves, and allow things to flow through, that itself is the natural state of happiness. It's like in Chinese medicine, understanding the body as an energy flow, right? Movement of energies. And when those energies get stuck, there is illness. So in the same way, when we practice generosity, when we let go of that tension, that clinging that we have in our minds, in our hearts, in our bodies, in our relationships, in our activities, then there is naturally a happiness. The Buddha said there's suffering at a cause. The cause of suffering, he said, is tanha, gripping. Joseph Goldstein, who's one of the founders of insight meditation in the U.S., described suffering as being like rope burn. We're holding on. And life, it turns out, is moving right along. So when we try to bear down and hold on in this way, we hurt. Right? We hurt ourselves, it turns out. We hurt others as well. Because we live in a very mysterious and fluid world. And when we keep trying to lock it down, we miss out. We miss out on the real beauty. So we imagine that happiness comes. We're so silly. I mean, it's kind of funny because we can say this and everybody knows this in a way, but still we do it over and over. So we imagine happiness as some kind of state of 24/7, nonstop, pleasant experience. Like, if I just, has anyone ever had this thought? If I just, then, and so we're on this wheel of activity that to support the if I just strategy. Maybe many of you are here because you're onto the fact that that strategy doesn't work very well. That strategy of trying to get and get away from, it doesn't make us happy. It makes us busy and tired. This is the cause of burnout, not of happy making. But because we're so sure, and because we live in a culture that supports our sureness of that, because what would happen if we got off the wheel? It would be the end of capitalism. Everybody would stop buying more stuff because we need that stuff, because if we just get the fill in the blank, then we'll be happy. So if everybody didn't believe that anymore, what would happen? We might stop purchasing so much. I'm speaking of myself as well as all of us. I'm not speaking from a place of you all should stop. Anyway, we're looking in the wrong place, propose for real happiness. There's this great story I found in my notes from a talk a few years ago. It's a Sufi story that is a great pointer toward where to look for real happiness, which is what the Buddhist path offers. And it's a story of the wise fool Mullah Nasruddin. Mullah Nasruddin was an eccentric wise man and fool in the Sufi tradition. And he and his donkey had been frequently crossing back and forth across the border between Persia and Turkey at the time. And as time went on, the officials at the border were noticing that as Nasruddin was crossing back and forth over the years, he was becoming increasingly well-dressed, well-fed, and wealthy. And so they began to get very suspicious of him and wondering, is he smuggling something? So they upped their efforts. And every time he would cross over, they'd do a more thorough search of the donkey and the donkey bag and what was under the saddle and what was in his pockets and so on. They never found what it was. So the story goes that some years later, one of the officials who had long since retired ran into Nasruddin in the marketplace. And he introduced himself and said, all these years I watched you going back and forth across the border, getting more and more wealthy, and we kept looking, and I'm retired now, and I promise I won't tell. Will you tell me, what was it? What was it that you were smuggling? And Nasruddin got a big grin on his face, and he said, donkeys. So we look so often in the wrong place. And in fact, we look too far. We make it too complicated, right? So from a, again, sort of Buddhist psychological perspective, we imagine that happiness is going to be in something out there. That we're going to get the something that's going to make us happy. Or, a little more sophisticated, we imagine that happiness is going to come from in here. If we just have the right blend of feelings, sensations, thoughts. If we just get enlightened, so we can project it out or we can project it in. But happiness doesn't come from out there or in here. Happiness has to do with our being with, our capacity to be with what's here, which will always be pleasant or unpleasant. And meaning that's the nature of how things are. So can we meet our pleasant experience without grabbing on and getting rope burn? Can we meet our unpleasant experience without either turning away or being crushed, being overwhelmed by the sorrow, by the sadness of what is there? Can we find a way, which we're practicing as we sit, to be right in the middle of what's happening without falling forward or falling back? Can we find a sense of composure, of balance in the midst of? And it turns out that when we're able to do that, that our happiness, real happiness, is right under our noses. It's right in our seat. It is, another way to say it is in the awareness itself. It is the recognition that there's something rather than nothing, rather than the constant wheel of wanting to get the something that's good and get away from the something that's bad. It's a big, big appreciation. Sometimes I think our culture fails to include that big, big kind of appreciation because we live in this sort of weird place where science has kind of become our new religion. Anyone notice that? Which is not to say that there's anything bad about science, but it's a particular worldview. I myself, here somewhere, I'm wearing an insulin pump. I've been diabetic for 4+ decades, and I am so grateful to science because it's keeping me alive, literally, right? And science and technology, actually both, right? And yet, there's something about the reductionistic perspective that leaves us, I think, like, part of the reason we keep looking for more is because data is just not that satisfying, to the whole of us. I was at a conference last weekend, called Mindfulness and Well-Being in the Workplace. And it was sponsored by the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley. Wonderful organization, terrific effort and conference. And I had this interesting experience, which was that I sat through the morning and I listened to lots and lots of people talking about mindfulness in the workplace and the programs that they had brought in, and then reams of data. So everybody was standing up and they had 15 minutes with their PowerPoint slides and all of these graphs and charts, all of these statistics, all of these numbers. And this was like panel after panel, speaker after speaker was doing the same thing, proving. So at the lunch break, I ran into a guy who had sat a retreat with me some years before, and he said, "Aren't you finding this just a little bit hollow?" And I said, "Yes," because I kept feeling like, do we need to keep proving something that actually feels so obvious to us as human beings? That being here is a good thing. That we don't need to keep proving it over and over. It's good to have that data. I'm glad there are people doing research and having data. But the data wasn't touching me. It was informing me. And so it was leaving me feeling like, I think we're kind of missing the point. So in that way, that this orientation toward proving data and facts, good, but it's not enough. It's not enough for the whole of us. And actually, we know, don't we? We know if we start to pay attention, we can know for ourselves that holding on and getting more is not really workable as a source of happiness. But that if we begin to open, to be interested, to have, we call it beginner's mind, to be interested and curious in our lives, to be generous with other people, that it'll turn everything around. And so there is, I think, a deep longing in us to connect to something that's not data, right? We want to connect to something that's actually already here. And when we allow ourselves to tap in a deep way to that source, then naturally we're filling ourselves up. And when we're filled up, naturally we can give. Giving is the natural response. But to do that requires what I was describing as learning to see. Part of the reason it's hard to learn to see is because we're in this sort of reductionistic, data-driven overlay. Like, it doesn't really count unless you can measure it. Check it out in your own life. Really. Are the things that are the most important to you the things that you can measure? Maybe. Maybe there are a few things that don't fit in that category. For most of us, that's the case. We also know from science, or this is the current theory, that our survival brain, the reptilian brainstem, has us oriented toward staying alive. And so the brain has, I don't even know if this is true, but they say the brain has a natural tilt toward scanning for the negative. So maybe in 10 years there'll be a different theory, but right now that's the hot one. And it does suggest that it would be worth our while to spend some time cultivating noticing what's good, whether that is true or not. Because there's so much good all the time. And we can miss it, right? We can get kind of numb to it, as I was describing about, hiking in the mountains. Yeah, another hike over Mount Tamalpais, whatever. A 65 degree day in November. Yeah, whatever. Right? Whoa. So there's a kind of tuning ourselves to appreciating what's here. Here is, we have time. This is, sometimes I think the best thing to do for Thanksgiving is just read stories and poems. So this is from Billy Collins. It's a beautiful description of this quality of learning to see. It's called Aimless Love. He said, "In the shadows of an autumn evening, I fell in love with a wren, and later that day with a mouse. The cat had dropped under the dining room table. In the shadows of the autumn evening, I fell for a seamstress, still at her machine in the tailor's window, and later for a bowl of broth, steam rising like smoke from a naval battle. This is the best kind of love, I thought, without recompense, without gifts or unkind words, without suspicion or silence on the telephone. The love of the chestnut, the jazz cap, and one hand on the wheel. No lust, no slam of the door. The love of the miniature orange tree, the clean white shirt, the hot evening shower, the highway that cuts across Florida. No waiting, no huffiness or rancor, just a twinge every now and then for the wren who had built her nest on a low branch overhanging the water, and for the dead mouse still dressed in its light brown suit. But my heart is always propped up in a field on its tripod, ready for the next arrow. After I carried the mouse by the tail to a pile of leaves in the wood, I found myself standing at the bathroom sink, gazing down affectionately at the soap. So patient and soluble, so at home in its pale green soap dish. I could feel myself falling again as I felt its turning in my wet hands and caught the scent of lavender and stone. Gratitude is about learning to see. Gratitude is opening our eyes, our ears, our nose, our hands, our touch, our taste to the actual flood of life coming at us 24/7. And sometimes it includes a dead mouse. Sometimes it includes a heart shot through with an arrow. It's not always pleasant, but the aliveness, the realness, the here-ness of life, and our ability to be here for it, this is happy making. So the Buddha and the whole of the Buddhist project is about pointing toward a kind of happiness that the Buddha described as being beyond conditions. In other words, we're not waiting for life to show up the way we want it. We're here to meet life as it is. We are not walking around the world looking to impress others so much as we're willing to walk around in the world willing to be impressed by soap, a bird, a mouse, a seamstress, whatever that is for you. And so if we can find our way to actually showing up and open our eyes, open our senses to see, we will be overwhelmed by the beauty that's here. And in the midst of that beauty, there's real difficulty. And in some way, I feel like it's so important for us to allow ourselves to be fed. Like this kind of seeing that he describes in the poem, this to me is real nourishment. So as we move toward this idea of a Thanksgiving feast, real nourishment, real feeding, real being full is not so much about how much turkey you can eat or how good the cranberry sauce is. It's about, are we willing to let ourselves be filled up by life? And in a way, I see for myself that the more I allow myself to be fed by the beauty and mystery of what's here, even in these simple kinds of beauties, that's what gives me the strength, right? It's like being a full well instead of an empty well, to really be able to meet the very, very real difficulties that I face and you face and our world faces. Because we can't really be of help. We can't learn how to respond rather than react with skill and with kindness to the world when we're running on empty, or when we're running after the wrong thing, imagining it's going to make us happy, because then we're too tired out to actually be able to address the real difficulties that we have. And so it feels to me that these twin pieces of learning to appreciate, genuinely appreciate, to see with eyes of gratitude, to allow that gratitude to open the heart so that we feel generous and we are able to give generously, that all of that goes hand in hand with our capacity to be able to sit in the middle of real sorrow, real grief, real pain, real loss that we're all facing in the world. I think we'll take a few questions, comments. We have a few more minutes before we close. So, anyone have something to say or ask? Please, in the back. Your name.
I'm David.
David.
I was just going to ask you, what would be the practice or the way to be present with a deep feeling of not feeling safe?
What would be the practice of how to be with the feeling of not being safe?
Yeah, safe and secure.
Well, so at a practical level, I think the first thing is to find out, am I not safe? Right? Because there are things that you might do to help make sure that you are safe. I don't know what the situation is that you're referring to. But I'm saying that because we don't want to use a practice to kind of override a truth. And if you're not safe, then you don't want to be walking around going, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, when you're not. That wouldn't be so skillful. So the central part of the practice is to be with what's here and to be willing to see what's true. So for me, if I have a feeling of being unsafe, I want to find out, well, am I? And if I'm not safe, then I want to look for skillful means to address that. That's real kindness. If it turns out that I am safe, but my mind is spinning circles about maybe I'm not, then that's a different story, right? So I don't know what you are. I don't know what's true for you, but the key is for you to find out. Is it real, right? And that's true for all of us, and actually for everything, isn't it? Because it's hard to know. Am I just making this up, or is this something real? But that's what the practice is about. That's what the whole practice is about, is can I get myself here enough? Am I willing to face the fact that maybe I'm not safe? Maybe the most skillful thing to do is to get out of here. I don't know what the situation is. But maybe I don't feel safe in this situation because it reminds me of something that happened in the past that has nothing to do with it, etc. Right?
I mean, is anybody safe when there's impermanence and loss? Sorry.
Well, it just depends on what you mean by safe.
Yeah.
Right? If safe means Am I going to be happy and contented 24/7 forever? Absolutely not. That's fantasy. That's not reality. But can I be safe in the face of pain, sorrow, dying? Yeah, you could be safe right up to the last moment, and the truth is, none of us knows what happens after that. So it depends what you mean by safe. We can use that, I think, as a way to say, safe means I'm comfortable. Good luck. It's kind of like you could do that, but you're not really alive then. You're just trying to build a bigger, more thicker walls to put yourself into a box. And I don't think that's so good for us. I think if we look at some of the horrors, frankly, that are unfolding across the planet, fundamentalism of all kinds, those are boxes that are getting more and more thick and rigid and tight, and there's a small group on the inside and all the others on the outside. Not so helpful. But those folks may think, well, this is safe. So just like we're confused about happiness, we may have some confusion about what safe means. But the key is to be with what's here. Yes?
Well, I'm really touched by your talk, and I'm hoping it's recorded. I would love to listen to it again, even though I thought I wrote every word. As you talked about grabbing earlier on, I'd love to go on a whole retreat, not about silence, not a sound, but to get more into the grittiness of what does grabbing look like, If you meet someone, you like their company, is grabbing meaning you call them to hang out with them the next day, or is grabbing being so protected that you wait another week so that it's safe? I don't know. Or is grabbing you just wait for the other person to do it, or how much is not grabbing a disguise for fear and insecurity? When it's subtleties. It's
it's very layered.
Yeah. When do we let go of things prematurely when we're being asked to be courageous and try again and then get it?
Well, the very unsatisfying but I think true answer for your question and yours as well is only you can know. So the practice, for the Buddha, he said basically, don't believe me, find out for yourself. So the practice is for all of us to be awake enough in our lives so that we're watching all of that happening. So that when we see a person, an object, an idea that feels pleasant, and we feel maybe the joy of it, and then we can feel ourselves reaching, and you watch the happiness start to go away as the reach comes, right? Or some version of that. So we know, and there's no shortcut. There's no you have to actually be here to notice what's happening in order to find out. But it's a great project, right? And it's a more ultimately satisfying project than imagining that if I just get what I want, then I'll be happy. No. If you can wake up enough, stay awake, pay attention moment by moment, then our whole life becomes this opportunity to learn, right? To find out. That is happy making. And as we're in that alive flow, we start to have more and more ability to be like, okay, that was that one, let's go to the next one. Because life is going to keep shooting arrows, as Billy Collins says. It's just how it goes. So the question is not, am I getting the arrows I want and getting away from the ones I don't want? It's, am I here for it? Am I here for it? Can I be here for it? Because the here for it that we're being here for is both. It's both extraordinarily beautiful, exquisite, mysterious, sublime, and extremely painful and difficult. Yes, both. Yeah. Are we at the end?
No, I have a question.
Oh. 1, 2, please.
Okay, yeah, we'll have time for both. So I love this idea that giving is the nearest cause of happiness. And yet, we're taught to be practical and thrifty and plan ahead and, retirement's coming and all this stuff. And so I find that giving is often constrained by insecurity or uncertainty of where does my safety net end and my excess that I can give from begin. And so I guess the question is, as a practice of giving, does it matter how much we give? I mean, I would imagine that we can be happy giving almost anything.
Yes.
And so is our happiness increased because we're giving more or more often? I don't mean dollar amounts.
No, I understand.
And sometimes we have this tendency to pull back.
Yeah. But the answer is the same, which is only you know. And only you know, really, when you cross that line from giving that's generous to giving that's like, whoops, I just put myself or my family or something in harm's way. And I didn't talk about here, but in the traditional teaching of giving, of dana, there are 3 basic categories of what can be given. So the first is giving stuff. Giving money, giving food, giving clothing. And this is really good, especially in a world where we have such a disparity of having things, right, to give stuff. But there are 2 other layers of giving, which are levels of giving. One is, sometimes it's traditionally described as giving the teaching, but really it's about giving your time, your care, your energy. It's about being willing to actually listen to someone, to make eye contact, to meet, to be present with. What a gift, we all know. When somebody does that for us, what a gift it is. Even brief, even a small hello, huge, making contact, that's giving. And the third kind of giving is what's called fearlessness. This is very curious. I've been looking at this for decades, actually. What does that mean? And fearlessness is in a way understood as, if you think about people who you really admire, often you admire them as much for their courage to be themselves, to stretch beyond what's comfortable or what's safe, right? In a way that continues to be inspiring, often for decades after, right? I mean, there's famous examples of Nelson Mandela, Martin Luther King, current Aung San Suu Kyi, right, in Burma. So we can be inspired by others who gave not something, but gave by their willingness to stand up for something that was true or right, to stretch beyond our familiar sense of ourself for something beyond oneself, right? That is another level of giving. And again, only we know when we've done that in a way that feels maybe scary but good, and when we've crossed our own line, right? So in order to know that, we have to stay awake. At any of those levels of giving, we have to know, like, maybe I don't really want to stay and listen to this person go on and on and on. So it stops being generous giving when we find ourselves being annoyed, right? It's not giving anymore. But maybe there's yes, I can give you this much, but then we have to be able to say that's enough, because it's not giving anymore. It's irritation or something. Yeah.
I have
One short, one brief.
Okay, I just had 2 quick comments. One is what you said about the second way of giving really resonated with me. For 20-some years, I was in a practice called reevaluation counseling, where pairs of people one person would just listen and almost say nothing for half an hour, and then they would switch. And it is such a gift that people are just starved for, to be listened to, because we do it so seldom in our culture. Yes. And the other thing, that poem was so lovely, and I'm not sure if I understood what you meant about the heart, but to me, putting the heart out in the field was being open to Cupid's arrow, not to the slings and arrows of problems, but to letting oneself fall in love with what is.
Yes.
So thank you very much.
Yeah. I think you can read it either way. Yeah. So, okay. Do we have time for one more, or are we done?
If it's really quick.
No, just to have a comment that your talk really resonated with me, and I think I really like the data, and I see gratitude, love, happiness that is unmeasurable. So there is no way to measure. And the more I trust in the divine providence, and I have enough, the more everything happens, miracle, magic, or whatever.
Yes.
It happens, so that's like totally resonates with me.
Yes. There's a place for data. It's just not the whole story, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
Pamela, can you stick around afterwards
Yeah,
for
I'm happy to.
questions?
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you all.
Next week, we will have an open discussion in lieu of a speaker on our program. And before we get to announcements, Donna is, I used to say Donna is the Pali word for generosity, but now I know it's actually the word for giving.
Yes. News to me too.
Which arises from generosity.
Yes.
But we'll cut straight to the chase. And so we have a Donna bowl that our host will go around with, and if he does not pass you, please find your way to the Donna bowl. It supports our renting of this beautiful temple each week, Donna for our speakers, and all of the outreach that we do, including our newsletter, over half of which go to inmates who, often, I get all their letters. It's often like their only source of this type of information from the outside world. So please be generous in your giving. Do we have a host?
I'm your host. There are snacks on the table. There is tea. Because the sink is out, there are compostable cups. And I have this problem at my office. Cups don't go into recycling. They go in the compost, just FYI. Some of us meet out front for lunch at 12:30, so you can see if anybody's hanging around there. There's a sign-up list for people. If you're not on the mailing list, please give your email and physical address, and I think that's about it.
Okay, do you have an announcement?
Yes, thank you. There will be an annual GBF Thanksgiving Day potluck at my place in East Bay. If you're interested in attending, please pick up a flyer out there. And if you don't find one, I have a few copies. And we would appreciate it if you could RSVP. And everyone is invited, both members of GBF as well as friends. So, in case on this Thanksgiving Day, a man who you've been seeing decides not to invite you to his place to meet his mother, you will have a place to go. So, thank you very much. That's fun.
Great. Yes. For the past 11 years, I have been living a half a block down the street, and I moved into a senior housing facility. I still have a lot of stuff. And I would like to have some help in letting go of stuff and practicing Dana and receiving donations if you're so inclined. But if you want to stop by right after the social hour, like from 12:30 to 1:30, it's a half block, 343 Santa Carlos.
Great. Little pre-holiday bargains.
Yeah.
Any other announcements? Okay, then. Let's gather in a circle for our dedication of merit. By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives. Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.